There once was a time where the rock star was the coolest person on earth. There was no wrong a rock star could do. A rock star could saunter to and from wherever they wanted because they were just that level of cool. But today, we're like 40 years past the time where the rock star was the coolest person alive. And I think it all ended with Kurt Cobain. But my theory might be wrong. I could be way off base, so I've enlisted the help of some experts to come in and teach me all about rock stars being cool. Hey ladies, how's it going? I'm the internet's most ruthless gatekeeper and the planet's most entertaining human being. I am the satirical miracle. My name is Dan Frampton. Thank you so much for kicking back with me here today. Like the video to get it boosted, subscribe if it's your first time here, and join the channel to become a member of the secret society. And with all that out of the way, let's talk about rock and roll, okay? Now back with Kurt Cobain, he might have been the coolest person on planet Earth. And this kind of goes all the way back to like Elvis Presley, Freddie Mercury, Eddie Van Halen. The list goes on and on. You could throw Ozzy Osbourne on there. Rock and rollers were the coolest people on earth. But today, in the year 2024, that's not so much the case anymore. Right now, there are rappers that are way cooler and way more culturally relevant than any rock and roller, okay? I don't think that Greta Van Fleet is that relevant today, but Led Zeppelin, a band that sounded exactly like them 50 years ago, was top of the absolute tops. So, where did it all go wrong? What happened? How did all of these rock stars fall off? Why aren't they cooking anymore? And why have they become cooked? So I went to Neopunk FM and I pulled up their video essay entitled "Have Rock Stars Stopped Being Cool?" Now I need to know about this, so I thought I would bring in some Zoomers that have a fresh opinion on this thing. Now, I have said a lot of critical things about this channel before. I've made a whole video about me criticizing this channel, okay? But they do know their stuff and they do a bunch of research. So instead of me doing that research, I'll just enlist their help. Was Kurt Cobain really the last cool rock star? Has there been anybody cool ever since? Let's find out together, shall we? So pop on your cans and let's listen to this straight edge Jonathan over here tell us all about rock and rollers.
For as long as rock stars have existed, they've had an aura of mystery, not caring, and not trying. Or at least looking like they weren't trying.
It's all about aura, okay? Even in today's day and age, a superstar of any variety needs to have that aura. And yeah, rock and rollers definitely had that aura. And I like how he hit on that point, that it's them looking like they're not trying, because they absolutely are trying to look like they're not trying.
To explain it, we'll have to go back to the beginning. Whoa, not that far. Stop. There.
That is such a corny joke, but we always gotta go back to the beginning.
The 1950s. Rock and roll was born out of rebellion against the social norms, which made it dangerous and cool, specifically to rebellious teenagers. This was perfect timing, because right after World War II, the word teenager was just invented, and had suddenly become a very marketable demographic.
Holy smokes, was really the word teenager that recent of a term? Wow, I'm learning so much already. But we knew we were going to be going all the way back to the 50s. I already mentioned Elvis Presley, okay? Elvis Presley was so edgy at the time, they didn't even want to film him below the waist because it was deemed too sexual, too edgy.
This was especially profitable because young people are insecure by default, and even more than adults, they need to be cool. On the other side of the market, this meant that artists had to go out of their way to seem cool, lest their music fall into the hands of nerds.
You don't want that. No one ever wanted that their music to fall into the hands of nerds. But now that teenagers are a thing, bands need to market to the teenagers, and teenagers want to be so cool, so now bands have to be so cool. So what are bands gonna do to make themselves seem so cool? Because when you think back to like the 50s and the 60s, with today's brain and today's eyes, those people don't really seem so cool. They seem kind of like wankery, right? With their little suits and their clean-cut hairstyles or whatever. But back in the day, that was going against the norm. That was edgy.
They lose their aura. And as an artist, the best, and really only place to build your aura and look mysterious was when you were getting interviewed by a major news network or TV channel.
That's it. It's all about building that aura. So where did people do all that aura building? Wasn't on the records, because you had to buy into the aura in order to have the record. You needed to go somewhere that was like big, a big publication that had numbers, you know what I mean? So you'd go to the Rolling Stones and the Spins of the world to tell your story. And by tell your story, I mean be mean to the interviewer to build your aura.
Before social media, fans had no clue what their favorite artists were up to on a day-to-day basis, making them seem a lot less relatable and a lot more like an otherworldly rock god. The only time fans had a chance to learn more about who they were personally came down to what few interviews they may have on TV or magazines, and for the most part, if they were lucky, they would get 1 or 2 of these in a year. The result? It was very easy for an artist to be viewed in the exact way that they wanted to.
Doing PR back then would have been so easy. Okay, it's like, okay, I want the public to believe this, that, and the other thing about me. They don't have access to me every single day, so they can really control it, like he's saying, in these really controlled interviews. 1 or 2 a year, do exactly what you want, have the exact perception built up that you want. If you want that aura, it was basically built in just by the nature of the way they went about doing it.
So naturally, interviews quickly became sandboxes to play around in and used as a platform.
This better be leading to Bob Dylan, because I think Bob Dylan kind of revolutionized the way that artists build their aura during interviews by being mean to reporters.
Just how quirky they were. Now, you might think...
Oh, here we go. I knew we didn't have to go that far. Let me just move me out of the way here so we can see everybody in the screen quickly while I have this all paused. All right, look at that, Bob Dylan. That is one of my favorite human beings to ever be a human being, okay? I love myself some Bob Dylan, and I know that this guy over here doing this video, the Straight Edge Jonathan or whatever, he might say some pretty rude things about Bob Dylan, you know what I mean? Because these guys over here at Neopunk FM, they like to make you feel like Zoomers are the only cool generation. Their generation invented being cool. Everything before that was just trying to be cool, but not quite cool. But I need him to tell me about Bob Dylan and how Bob Dylan revolutionized the way that artists build aura for themselves.
The trend of abusing interviewers to look cool started in the 1970s with punk rockers like Gigi Allen and Sid Vicious. But the real forefather of the movement is Bob Dylan, whose schizo-twink ramblings kept his career afloat through the...
Schizo-twink ramblings? That is a very interesting way to describe what Bob Dylan was doing.
...past years and into the cocaine ones.
How many people who labor in the same musical vineyard in which you toil, how many are protest singers?
Well, I think there's about 136.
You say about 136? Or do you mean exactly 136?
It's either 136 or 142.
For Dylan, this was partly a consequence of being a glue-sniffing hippie weirdo.
Yeah, well, you know, they did a lot of weird things in New York at the time, that is for sure. But Bob Dylan, the way that he would have these journalists just chasing their tail is really a thing to behold, even all these years later. There are notes you can take just by watching Bob Dylan do what Bob Dylan did.
But it was also a deliberate move to create a mysterious image, not unlike Playboi Carti.
Bob Dylan and Playboi Carti, they're the exact same thing.
Later on, alternative rock artists of the 80s and 90s like Dinosaur Jr. and Yo La Tengo paved the way for vocalists who sound like they're fighting against 5 or 6 NyQuil.
Great bands, 3 out of 10 joke.
Germany was real uptight. Sandwiches.
In the wake of punk rock's victory over glam metal, this was the image to pursue. And it extended not only to the music, but to its presentation.
We just don't have anything to say about anything, really. It's all become one big blobby blur. Yeah, I mean, it's really is very difficult for us to answer the simplest questions.
Interviews really aren't like this anymore, are they? It was really a wonderful time where artists would come in to a space and just be as difficult to deal with as possible. Back in the 90s or the early 90s when this was all going on, I absolutely loved it very, very much. And then into the late 90s, it became more about how many butt, poop, and fart jokes can you squeeze into a 2-minute interview slot.
You know what? When we were mixing it, we were really sick, and Kurt went down to the health department. and he got these codeine cough syrups, and we were just popping those, and we were just like in La La Land, cooking on this codeine joy juice.
Let him cook on that cocaine joy juice, bro.
In a moment of television history more devastating than the collapse of the towers, iconic Sleepyhead's Beck and Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth co-hosted a programming block on MTV. What happened next can only be described as two grown men who both obviously care about their image, trying to not care each other for 120 minutes straight.
Trying to not care one another. That is an amazing way to put it. Yeah, I agreed. This was definitely a time to be alive. Both of these guys wanted to seem like they never wanted to be in any room ever, but somehow managed to be in every single room that ever existed back in the 90s.
So Beck, your song Loser, man, it's a smash hit. How do you feel about that?
It's like surfing in some oil spillage.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's it, man. What exactly is your real name? Is it Beck? Were you christened Beck?
Like, dude, that is so cringe. They're just doing, like, the worst improv scene imaginable. They're like, okay, I'm gonna do everything in my power to try to look like I'm not caring whatsoever, but you have to look like you don't care about that I'm doing nothing to look cool. Let's out-apathy one another. It's just like a really lazy improv exercise.
All right.
This is a chilling demonstration of a universal law of not giving a fuck. The most dangerous thing an interviewer can do is put two stone-cold chillers in the same room. It's like pointing two microphones at each other. Each has such a need to prove that they care the least what others think of them that they can't help but escalate the situation in a feedback loop.
Escalate. Feedback. Those are improv words.
So you never want to listen to either of their music ever again. Incidentally,
That's true. I've never wanted to listen to their music ever. Thurston and Beck. Get out of here with their bad selves.
Thurston Moore would come up again in this story, infamously treating literally the only interviewer that anyone cares about the same way those kids on Skype treated Chris Chan. But if we're talking about self-aware 90s rock stars that tried to not try,
here we go. In comes Kurt Cobain. Is my theory going to be correct? Was Kurt Cobain the last cool rock star?
There was absolutely no better artist better known for this than Kurt Cobain, the ultimate salesman of the Gen X slacker image. With the fall of hair metal and the rise of grunge,
he did it so authentically, though. It didn't seem like he was putting on an act or whatever, which Beck definitely seemed like he was doing. Like I said, it just seemed like they were doing like an improv scene perpetually throughout the entire decade. Whereas Kurt Cobain just seems like he's there. He's just smoking a cigarette, even though his image is just as deliberately concocted as the other dudes. He just seems far more authentic.
being authentic and real.
Oh my god, we have the same brain over here, straight edge Jonathan.
Replaced leading a life of glamour and excess as the coolest thing an artist could do. And the biggest spearhead of this change was Kurt, which was ironic, because everything about his persona was totally commodified, and he was stacking bricks off of it.
Stacking mad bricks.
Style, to his attitude, to his greasy hair, Kurt's persona was as perfectly sculpted as his chin.
Exactly what I just said. Yes, he was doing it all on purpose. He knew exactly what he was doing. It seemed authentic, but it was just as calculated as anything in the music business.
In the midst of Nirvana mania, Kurt did everything he could to make sure it looked like he didn't care about any of it. In interviews, he made sure to appear utterly bored, like he'd rather be anywhere else doing anything else. Questions relating to the meaning of his lyrics, his thoughts on fame, or anything serious at all was met with dismissal, disinterest, and sarcasm. The millions of angsty children of divorce across the world ate that shit up.
Oh yeah, we loved it. Loved every little bit of it. Even though Kurt Cobain was definitely a little bit before my generation. I mean, I was only like 9 years old when he ended it all for himself or whatever. I definitely grew up more in like the pop punk era, but this is the kind of stuff that defined it all. This is the kind of stuff that made me want to learn about Bob Dylan. This is the kind of stuff that really made a whole rock star image seem like something to like chase after.
And he knew it. Kurt claimed to not know anything about music theory.
Because of how much aura Kurt had, people were so obsessed with every little thing he did. Was that the real Kurt? Was that a put on? Who knew? We all wanted all the answers all the time. So much so that his journals are one of the most highly selling books of all time.
Even saying that he didn't know the names of simple chords. His approach to guitar was unconventional, sure, but there was no way in hell that it was the work of someone who knew as little about music theory as he claimed.
Oh yeah, he definitely knew his way around the guitar neck. This guy played guitar. This guy knew what songwriting was. Kurt Cobain had it very well studied. This guy was a student of the game.
It just sounded cool to people who didn't actually know shit about music. He didn't want to be lumped in with the self-indulgence of the rock stars of the 80s, so instead, he was self-indulgent in his own way. He curated every little aspect of his image to fit the punk rock ideal of cool. He dressed in mismatched layers of rags and ripped.
Like, look at this. Even to this day, Kurt Cobain's influence is felt in just the guy you're seeing in front of you. Look at this little sweater I got going on here. I wouldn't be wearing this sweater mismatched with this hat and this t-shirt and these glasses if it wasn't for a guy like Kurt Cobain that did it also effortlessly and intentionally.
Jeans to ensure it seemed like he didn't care about fashion or the way he looked, which of course had become the hot new style that was sold in magazines. He constantly played down his commercial success.
I have so many striped articles of clothing, an absolute unprecedented amount of flannel in my wardrobe, all thanks to this guy over here.
Complaining about it at times, when secretly he would call MTV if they didn't play a Nirvana video frequently enough. He claimed the band rarely ever practiced, but in reality he was a drill sergeant about making sure that they did every single day for hours on end. Back then, it all seemed authentic, at least in comparison to whatever was happening in the 70s and 80s. Kurt Cobain was the coolest, most uncool figure in the public eye. Despite the fame, glory, and tons of cash that he bathed in, he carefully upkept his punk rock attitude, which was like a job of its own outside of the actual music.
It was. Definitely something like that is absolutely crazy, and really definitely lumps Kurt Cobain into like this whole performance art part of the world where it isn't just him making art, he's doing a perfectly crafted thing, a vision. This guy has tent poles and markers and ceilings in place in his mind that he is trying to reach creatively and financially, and absolutely succeeding at it all the way across the board.
And arguably made him at least as much money. There's no mistaking the intentionality behind it all, and nobody did it quite like him. He kept up his anti-establishment image, all while reaping plenty of benefits from said establishment.
To be able to do that and not get called out for it is absolutely so impressive. Because that is the biggest like hypocrite thing in the world, to be like, I hate capitalism, and then just like bathing in money every single night. But that was 100% Kurt Cobain, and we love him for it.
On the surface, it seemed like Kurt was taking a stand and spitting on the conventional image of the rock star. But really, he's just redefined what being a rock star meant, making himself the kingpin of his own monopoly.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain wasn't the anti-rock star. He was just the new kind of rock star. The overly promoted, overly saturated, on the radio, on TV, rock and roller that used to look like Nikki Sixx, that used to look like Alice Cooper.
He became the new standard for everything that he had claimed to hate. The truth, of course, eventually came out. Kurt Cobain reached that kind of fame where there was nowhere and nothing to hide anymore. Within his personal journals from before all the fame are the plans of a normal kid from a normally fucked up childhood who did, in fact, want to be a rock star.
Exactly, and these journals, man, like I was saying, they were highly sought out. If the bookstore in your town didn't have them, someone was requesting to get them brought into the bookstore. Everybody wanted to read these things and see what was going on in the real mind of Kurt Cobain. I wish that Andy Kaufman kept the same kinds of journals, but you know that kind of stuff is lost to time.
From entries detailing his plans for when he would hit it big, to written practice interview questions with pre-scripted answers that would make him sound aloof, Kurt's realness and his story of never caring about fame were inarguably debunked. Also in his journals was a list of his top 50 albums of all time, and honestly it's super weak. To label Kurt Cobain's persona as fraudulent would be a bit unfair, At the end of the day, it's more like a pro wrestling character.
It's 100% like a pro wrestling character, which is why I identify and recognize it so easily and why it means so much to me. The thing that Kurt Cobain is doing there is the kind of thing that I've always been absolutely enamored with. I've said Bob Dylan, Kurt Cobain, and Andy Kaufman a million times in this video because they're the kinds of guys. Those are the kinds of creators that I truly identify with in a very spiritual, kind of deep sort of way.
Kurt started out just like thousands of others, a kid that just wanted to be a rock star. So he played up the character of the disinterested punk rock slacker who couldn't care less about fame, from which he gained unprecedented levels of hella fame.
Unprecedented levels of hella fame. These guys have such interesting ways of delivering lines.
Doing heroin to self-medicate for your hot girl stomach problems, then the shotgun, leaving behind your 2-year-old daughter, is probably the coolest thing that anybody has ever done.
Spitting into the face of the meta.
Range underground music to the mainstream. And the same is true for Kurt Cobain's influence on artists' public personas. From the 90s on out, entering a dissociative state when asked how your career is going was no longer just the way that you would respond to your family every Thanksgiving. It was the first rule in the music interview playbook. But the only thing bigger in the 90s than Nirvana was a hip little invention we at Neopunk call the World Wide Web.
Here's the thing about Neopunk FM. They have all the facts in there, there's a lot of character, and there is a ton of personality going on with what I'm seeing through their content, 100% for sure. And maybe it's because I'm many years their senior that their stuff doesn't 100% hit with me. But when I get it in my head to give them the benefit of the doubt and to sit down and have patience with their videos, they absolutely do hit a lot of marks that I do respect and appreciate a whole lot. But it's talking into the iPhone thing over here that I really still don't like, and just like the monotone reading of the script type vibe that I can just see right through. If they were a little bit more natural and had a little bit more camera charisma, maybe it would hit me in a different way. But this kind of post-ironic autism maybe is exactly the kind of brand that they're going for, and it must be because it's 100% working for them.
And on the internet, a whole new generation of virgins with something to prove was coming of age. As early as its widespread adoption, the internet had a reputation for being home to angry, insecure trogs.
That was me, and still to this day. Angry, insecure trog. And Spurg. Yeah, can't forget Spurg.
Early days, the internet was the last refuge of antisocial nerds, and they developed a strong culture of flame wars, the humble art of being really mean on the computer, all facilitated by anonymity, an absence of face-to-face communication, and a strong desire to keep your page of the forum for the true heads. As the reach of the internet grew, and this culture persisted, all of a sudden everybody on Earth had the chance to feel like a big boy. In certain internet circles, like 4chan's R9K board.
Okay, we're starting to get into the modern day here. We don't have Kurt Cobain anymore. He's definitely done the deed. And we'll see if there's anybody cool after him. I mean, we still got all this video left, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing anybody as cool as Kurt Cobain in the lands of 4chan, in the worlds of something awful. We'll see.
We can observe a fascinating subversion of the norm. Like normal people, they value gatekeeping and bullying. But in their topsy-turvy, kooky, crazy world, real-world coolness is totally antithetical to authenticity and belonging.
You see how he used all those funny words, all of that little colorful language that just came out of this presenter here, but he did it all deadpan. And I guess that might be the style or whatever, but it didn't really have as much style in the delivery as it did in the actual words themselves. And maybe that's another reason why I'm having a little bit of a disconnect with their channel, because their words are fun and have character, but they don't seem to be fun people whatsoever.
If you have ever had sex, or could theoretically ever have sex, you are not one of us. I mean one of them. A more modern example could be the Dime Square art scene.
But they are wearing me down 100%. I might be becoming a fan of Neopunk FM. Maybe I made that content cop a little bit post-haste.
In Brooklyn, whose #1 export is podcasts and is home to some of the coolest 36-year-olds
all of those people that they just showed looked exactly like me
on Earth. But overall, the internet is a place where being cool and not giving a fuck is a necessary value. Losing an argument, making any sort of factual error, using the wrong your, being cringe, all are grave mistakes and deeply embarrassing personal failures. You've probably done at least one of these things, and you know how incentivized you feel to demonstrate your coolness online ever possible.
He's nailing it. All of that is very true, and now that is exactly the kind of ecosphere we're living in, and it's just gotten 100 times worse since the beginning of the internet. And if only Jonathan Straightedge over here was around for this time. I don't think he was. I think he might have been a little bit too young to appreciate the early internet. But you know who was there? The internet's most ruthless gatekeeper and the planet's most entertaining human being, the satirical miracle Dan Frampton. He was there 100% of the time. I was on my family computer. I was on those forums. I was listening to punk rock. I had my MySpace account. It was the whole kit and caboodle.
And it would come back around to the artists, too. In the internet age, musicians have more access than ever to their fans, and vice versa, playing the interview game has become even stranger. It started casually, with artists like Crystal Castles, who grew up on Usenet and MySpace, totally entrenched in IDGAF.
Something awful. MySpace. Things that I've already mentioned because I was there.
To younger artists like them, the personal connection and life updates fans wanted could be served fresh on blogs and social media, and interviews became just a place to demonstrate your powerful aura.
I would spend a day at an amusement park with Helen Keller, for sure. I really don't listen to electronic music or anything. I just don't really get it.
But as
God damn, yeah, like there's no aura there whatsoever. And now there's interviews all over the place. You can get podcast interviews, shoot interviews, glossy Rolling Stone interviews, you know, all sorts of things. And the interviews don't even matter anymore. I can't remember the last time I was like, oh, I wonder what this person has to say in interview style. People are creating their aura now on their own platforms, on their own like Instagrams and Twitters and YouTubes and TikToks and the like.
As we all know, things would only get worse from 2008 onwards, and not just for Crystal Castles. As normies latched onto the ironic interview, the true selves had to push things even further into post-irony. Death Grips, famously, has only given 3 interviews in 13 years, and one of them is actually an art piece they staged themselves, which has no questions and no answers.
That's how you do an interview.
From a band like the DGs, as we like to call them, it's a clear backlash to the vapidity and pointlessness of not only the traditional interview, but even the ironic subversion of the traditional interview. In more recent years, artists like Playboi Carti have pushed that idea even further. To Death Grips, the absence of the interview had weight. The fact that they wouldn't do an interview was the message. Carti, on the other hand, would do pretty regular interviews in the earlier part of his career.
Hit me up in the DMs, I reply.
But as he began to develop his mysterious King Vamp Rockstar persona, he stopped doing interviews entirely for 5 years, building up an aura of suspense as he became more and more of an eerie, cult-like figure every day.
Yeah, Playboi Carti really did do all of those kinds of things, but for some reason, I'm not as drawn to him as I am these other characters. But there's no doubt that Playboi Carti is like working with the same playbook as the guys that we were talking about earlier. But still, I can't stand his music and he drives me crazy.
That is, until he suddenly and unexpectedly blew all the tension he'd accumulated, not with a high-effort art piece interview like Death Grips, but with an on-the-spot TikTok fit check that totally underwhelmed and disappointed any fan who made the mistake of getting invested.
How much for the bullets, my boy? Opium. Opium. Okay, I see the kicks, my boy. How for the kicks? 1-on-1. 1-on-1.
Once again,
and all done. All gone in one little moment. All the aura just sucked out of it. So in this landscape, okay, you can create all this aura and it can be ripped away from you just as quickly. Because way back in the 60s, you had 1 or 2 interviews a year. Now you're all over the internet. You spend 5 years away building up this aura, building up this mystique, and one guy gets you on TikTok and you just totally break character and ruin the illusion completely. And all the stuff that I was talking about him going on to like Aiden Ross's live stream or whatever, I think that's him trying to fix what he broke over here. Like, I'm not so deep into the Carti lore, as you can probably tell. I'm not really the biggest fan of his, but let's continue. Maybe the story progresses even further here.
The message was that the artist wasn't trying and didn't care, and if you did, you fucked up. It's also a reminder of how effective Playboi Carti's strategy of privacy really is.
Playboi Carti really does seem aloof. He really does seem like he doesn't care, but he also seems like he's trying to be aloof and trying to look like he doesn't care, the way that Kurt Cobain did, but it's very transparent that he's doing that.
With fans latching onto any new piece of content like Barnacles, no matter how banal it is. Other internet-era artists, sort of like the 4chan users who made a positive reputation out of being loose.
With 100 gecs over here, nah, You know what? People are taking inspiration from the Bob Dylans, from the Kurt Cobains out there, but the internet age is just not the kind of place where you can build that kind of aura in this kind of way. You gotta do it in a different sort of way.
Losers aren't trying to be mysterious and cool like Death Grips or Playboi Carti, but still make use of that sweet Gen Z post irony. The 100 gecs Genius interview has a casual vibe, sort of like Crystal Castles or Kurt Cobain, but the difference between Gen X and millennial sarcasm and Gen Z irony is as big as the difference between the lowly banana and the mighty plantain.
Exactly. That is a great way to put it, but you gotta blur the line between the banana and the plantain. So half your audience thinks that you're a banana, the other half is sure that you're a plantain, but the real ones know that you're actually blurring the line between the two. You're both. You're kind of like a Frankenweenie of banana goodness.
The hyperpop duo are almost embarrassingly low effort as they explain how they wrote Money Machine, but they never seem like they don't care. Dylan Brady only appears twice in the entire video, but when he sings his verse, he changes into an entire costume and takes on the nasal quiver of a pop-punk ballad.
Tell me what's the deal, I've been trying to go to bed, I've been up for days, I've been trying to get it.
The image they present is that they're not really invested, but it's not an insult or disrespectful towards Genius, just a way of life for digital natives with no attention span. Shed Theory also demonstrates their high school meme page pedigree.
I'm sorry, that whole 100 gecs thing or whatever, that does not hit the same marks at all. It just comes across like lazy YouTuber type stuff, which I don't have a problem with, which is fine, which is kind of like, it might be doing the thing. That might actually be the closest to the Kurt Cobain that we've seen so far, but it's not quite there, not for me, not by a long shot. Because the thing about Kurt Cobain, Bob Dylan, is that they were able to do that mystique building thing, and it would build generational gaps, and they would be huge voices for an entire generation. And I'm just not seeing the same kind of thing off the back of this type of aura building.
In their Our Generation Music interview, using their precious minutes mostly to talk about how much they love watching porn and coming and themselves.
I shaved my pubic hair for this. As long as we got the internet and I can watch Pornhub, I'll be straight.
We got mad magazines from Japan, Japanese porn shit.
Naked shit. We're gonna eat candy in the shower and then take a bath together.
That's so cringe, bro. Come on, that's not even funny. That's not even anything.
It sounds a little off-putting from the outside, but the vibe of the interaction and their music is that they're all just fucking around trying to make each other laugh. And for once, the interviewer is a participant instead of a victim, as they eventually break him into their sense of humor.
We're gonna kiss and come.
Yo, white humor is the funniest humor. You can't tell me no different.
It works just as well on the fans watching the interview from home. Just like OGM's Hakeem Rowe, we get to feel like we're just hanging out and shitposting with friends.
I don't know if that's exactly the vibe that I get from that interaction. And maybe that's just a generational divide here. But maybe I'm learning something here. This is what the new I don't give a fuck looks like. But again, I don't know who these people are. It's not like galvanizing an entire generation or whatever. But my eyes are starting to open, and I won't be as dismissive to this kind of interaction in the future.
Artists like 100 gecs and Shed Theory are...
I'll still be relatively dismissive, but not overly dismissive, and I might give them the benefit of the doubt quickly.
Welcome change to the standard interview subversions that Kurt Cobain cemented as the norm in the 90s. Like a lot of other people their age, they're questioning the value of constantly trying to act hard and prove that you care less than everyone else, instead opting to be casual and open and just try to have a good time without putting anyone else down.
I mean, all of that sounds nice. Being casual, open, not letting anybody down, not being a bully, not being ruthless in any way. That sounds great. Doesn't sound like my kind of thing, though. Maybe I need to wait for this era to kind of pass on by.
Culture that's this heavily defensive and brain-rotted, it might be the closest thing that we have to Nirvana.
Okay, that better be a laugh track, because I'm not feeling it.
No, not that guy. I mean the Buddhist state of enlightenment. None of us are really...
Oh my god, dude, bro, man, bro, dude, bro.
...above caring about things, and anyone who really was probably wouldn't make very good music. To embrace cringe is to live free. To reject it is to die cringe.
Oh, very well said. Yep. You got to embrace the cringe, but now putting all of that into my brain and spitting out some conclusions, I'd say that Kurt Cobain was the last cool rock star, okay? Death Grips, I don't think hit the same mark. 100 Gex, I don't think hit the same mark. That last group that they were talking about that I didn't even remember the name of their band or whatever, that didn't do the same thing as Kurt Cobain, Bob Dylan, not even by a long shot. Rock and roll is dead, coolness is dead, there's no such thing as aura anymore. If you want to blur the line, you gotta start a YouTube channel and start calling yourself the internet's most ruthless gatekeeper. Okay, thank you so much for watching. See you later.